Hi, friends. I am Marie Woods, founder of Life Above Foundation, your host, a professional counselor, family and marriage therapist, and a wholeness life coach. Welcome to Relationship Real Talk, the podcast where we dive deep and tackle the toughest relationship challenges Christians face today. Are you tired of struggling with unforgiveness, past wounds, and conflicts? Feeling lonely or having trouble communicating? Wrestling with trust issues or trying to balance your faith with your relationship goals? Feeling stuck and stagnant in your relationship? You are in the right place. Here at the Relationship Real Talk, we get real and cover a wide range of topics, including relationship anxiety, trauma bonds, infidelity, estrangement, toxic dynamics, dating after divorce, and how to heal from relationship trauma and grow and build healthy and lasting relationships. We're not just about identifying the problems. We're all about finding real, integrated solutions from multiple disciplines and offering professional help from different fields to mend and strengthen your relationships. So, let's get started on this journey together, one honest, heartfelt conversation at a time. Welcome to today's podcast. Our guest speaker today, his name is Thomas Gagliano. He is best-selling author and a life mentor, author, and speaker. Mr. Gagliano, he holds a master's degree in social work and a BA in business. He has a background in business and has used that knowledge to create a therapy practice that focuses on family dynamic issues. He specializes in working with parents, relating to childhood messages, and how one's experience shapes their worldview. He discusses challenging issues from his vast professional background while interweaving his own experiences to crystallize concepts. He is a sought-after expert and speaker and has appeared on many television and radio shows. So he has provided trainings at many universities and community-based organizations regarding parenting and family dynamic problems. When he is not training, speaking, or writing, he provides family-focused individual and couples therapy. In all of his professional endeavors, his focus is to give back what he has learned to assist others in finding balance and create a healthier self. Welcome, Thomas.
Thank you for having me.
So I'm very excited about our conversation today. So today our topic will be focusing on the impact of trauma, unhealed trauma on relationships. So why don't you give our audience a background, just briefly introduce yourself, why you are doing what you do, and why you are interested in this topic.
Well, I facilitate 3 groups a week for those that can't, those for recovering addicts. I'm a recovering addict, those that are traumatized. So they understand why and how they're sabotaging their happiness. It's not that they want to sabotage it. They don't understand how they're set up to do that in childhood. So I always talk about where everything begins, and it always begins in childhood. Everything begins in childhood. The roles we are set up to play begin in childhood. The people pleaser, the caretaker, the defiant role, the perfectionist. Everything's set up in childhood. So I always work first with childhood messages. And for me, in my life, I realized when I went back to school and my experience in the 12-step program, all children are egocentric. It means the world revolves around them. They want their parents' attention. And one of the things I'm going to say here that is so important, please hear this. A child that feels like they don't matter to their parents, they won't stop loving their parents. They'll stop loving themselves. When that happens, that child will become fragmented like me. What does that mean? It means they're split into 2. They'll show the world one side of themselves, what they think the world will accept, but there's an inner self that they're afraid to show who they really are because they feel defective. You know, when my father was out drinking and gambling and womanizing and didn't come home at night, at 10 years old, I never said, gee, my dad's got a drinking problem. He should go to AA. At 10 years old, I said, what's the matter with me? Something's got to be wrong with me that my father doesn't want to be with me. and I became fragmented. And I
Mhm.
would never show anyone how I felt inside. And boy, that sabotaged a lot of my happiness growing up.
Mhm.
And for me, my God, I was molested by a priest. My God became money. I
Mhm.
thought money was the key to everything. And I made a lot of money, but I blew a lot of money in my addictions, and money never did the trick. And I had to learn the hard way. My wife and children left me about 30 years ago, and I had a choice. Was I going to try and change the world to fit what I wanted, or
Mhm.
was I going to change? And
Mhm.
that's when I got myself into recovery, 12-step programs. And that was the beginning of my journey.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for sharing your own story. So, in your book, the best-selling book, it's called The Problem Was Me. So, you talk about the three essentials. Let's dive into the three essentials. I really want you to tell our audience what are those three essentials.
Well, awareness, action, and maintenance. In a sentence, without awareness, I won't know what action to take. And without action, there's nothing to maintain. So if I'm working on my foot, if I go to the doctor and I'm working on my foot and it's my shoulder that's the problem, I'm not getting anywhere. I have to be familiar with the childhood messages. Why? Because I don't want to beat myself up all my whole life thinking that I'm the problem. This is what I teach in my groups. Learn your childhood messages, learn which ones helped you and which ones need a little attention, and challenge those in a we process, a group setting. When you build self awareness, the actions become much easier to take. And those actions become a we process. That's when you allow what I call witnesses in. Witnesses are your therapist, or your sponsor, or group members, or 12-step meeting members. These are people that can help you take those actions to make you accountable to take those actions. Now, if you maintain it, you can't take those actions 3 days a week. If you can maintain those healthy actions, you will start to heal your trauma, your wounds, and you'll see life through different lenses. That's what'll happen. So it begins with self awareness. And this is what we talk about in my groups, the awareness to know which childhood messages we need to challenge. The obstacle,
Mhm.
I didn't trust anybody growing up. If I couldn't trust my parents,
Mhm.
who was I going to trust?
Mhm.
So I always fought allowing anything into my life that was a higher power. See, I didn't trust any process that I couldn't control. I needed to be in control. Here's
Mhm.
my problem. My best thinking was getting me in trouble. I couldn't be in control of the process. So when I went to therapists, when I got a sponsor, when I started to do these things, my obstacle was giving up that control. I was so afraid to do that because if I did that, I believed, as it did in childhood, that
Mhm.
people would hurt me. I would be let down. So
Mhm.
trust is the key. Takes time, takes patience, but until I turned it over to other people and allowed them in the inside, remember fragmentation, the inside of my life, I was destined to sabotage all my happiness.
Wow. So the three essentials, number one, you said is self-awareness, right? And
To
then
use action,
the second
through
was
awareness, I learned the actions I need to take. I can make better choices. And
mhm.
three, I need to maintain those actions. And I'm not even talking about just addiction. I just did a radio show for New Year's resolutions, career goals,
Mhm.
putting down healthy boundaries,
Mhm.
whatever it is, it takes those three essentials in order to achieve what you want to achieve.
Right. So that's the key that the person has to be consciously aware what's going on inside outside. And then
Right,
they
but right. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but that's why you need that extra help. We have blind spots. You
right.
need a therapist sponsor. You need people to see what you don't see. But you're right. You need to build that self-awareness, but it's not easy to do it alone.
Mhm. That's right. So other people like people who we feel safe with, who people we can trust, and
Yep.
they can hold us accountable and point out the blind spots. So even though the person him herself cannot see that blind spot, but once we are consciously aware of that, what we are doing, the patterns, right, then we can take the right action. But there's a second essential. Then once we take action, it needs to be consistent. In that way, it's lifestyle changing, right?
That's right. I can't put boundaries down Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Who's going to listen to them? I can't work on my recovery Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday
Mhm.
because I'm not going to keep that structure going. Life is about building healthy habits and healthy structure. When
Right.
you're not attaining the goals you want, when you're not staying sober, it's because you're in bad habits. We
Yeah.
got to develop healthy habits, healthy structure.
Exactly. I'm reminded, the scripture as a Christian, the scripture said that we need to put off the older self and knowing what's those older habits or patterns and put them off, let them go. Like what you mentioned about, I have to let go of the control if that's the older pattern. Then put on the new self. Okay, now what the new self, new habits, new behavior look like? Then we just practice that daily. It's like people go to the gym, they want a muscle. They cannot gain a
Excellent.
bigger
Right.
muscle by doing once or twice a week, right? They have to be
Excellent.
consistent.
Great example. Great example. Yep.
Very good. So let me just tackle back. Earlier, you were talking about egocentricity and the fragmentation. Let's dive in a little bit more. So, why is it important to understand the egocentricity and the fragmentation and how this affects the person's emotional intimacy?
Well,
Since this is a relationship podcast.
if you want to have build a child's integrity and self-esteem, a child needs to feel that they're important. The child, look, our parents showed us, they were the first teachers that showed us how to view the world, and the world viewed us. They're very important. I need to instill in my children that they're important. Not only they're important with what they do, but in their feelings. When I talk about parenting, I tell parents all the time, when your child shares their feelings, validate those feelings. Make them know that their feelings matter. A child that feels like their feelings don't matter will feel like they don't matter. So early on, that egocentricity is so important. Even parents that work all the time, they may be doing this to save money for their kids' college, for a better home, but a child doesn't see it that way. A young child only says, "Why aren't they spending more time with me? What's the matter with me?" Early on, their brain's not developed enough to understand anything more than that.
So you can explain to us a little bit these two important concepts. First is egocentricity. So tell us what's the egocentricity?
Egocentricity means the child always looks at the world through their own ego, their own lenses. I'll give you an example.
Mm.
My son at 5 years old said to me, "Dad, what are you getting me for Father's Day?" The world revolves around him. All kids are like that. I remember once taking my son down the stairs and I cradled him and I slipped and I fell and I put my arm into a nail on the pictures on the stairs and I'm like frazzled. My glasses broke, but he was fine. We got to the bottom of the stairs and he goes, "Dad, it's not nice to push little boys down the stairs." That's egocentricity. The world revolves around them.
Right.
So if the parent's not giving them the attention that they feel they need, they won't look at the parents in a bad vein because kids won't do that. They'll say, something's got to be wrong with me. And that's when the fragmentation comes in. That's when people either act in with depression and anxiety or they'll act out with addictions because they're not safe enough to be themselves. So they become fragmented. What I teach in my groups, the goal is to become congruent. One person, say what you mean what you say, and being okay with the person you see in the mirror.
I got that concept. So when you talk about fragmentation, this is more like a professional term for our audience out there. If you have never heard about this term, fragmentation. So can you explain to us briefly?
Fragmentation in my book, The Problem Was Me, I say that when you come from a tough childhood, you start to wear a mask. You split into two selves. You're not one, you're two. You wear a mask that they show to the world. I showed the world I was a successful businessman. I showed the world that I coached my kids in sports. I showed the world that I knew what I was doing. Inside, I felt defective, unlovable, not that I deserved happiness. So when things got emotional with me, I sabotaged it because that's when the feelings came up. This is very important to know. We all come from the version of intimacy we see as children. What did we see our parents do? Did we see our parents shut down and run away? Did we see our parents get angry? Did we see our parents act out with addiction? That version of intimacy is going to show up in your adult life when you feel those emotions. So if you're not aware of the version of intimacy you saw, awareness again, if you're not aware of that, you could sabotage your happiness because you're time traveling. All of a sudden, I'm not Tom at age 50, I'm Tom at 10 with my wife. And those emotions are going to make me do the same thing I did at 10 years old: shut down, run away, get angry. So we have to be aware of that version of intimacy we learned as children because we're going to replay that in our adult life and we may not even know it.
Wow, that's so true. That is so true. So even when we become adults, no matter we're 30s, 40s, 50s plus, and we still have the younger version inside of us to play the game.
We'll time travel. If you come from a tough childhood, you'll have wounds. And then when those wounds are touched, usually in emotional situations, you will react the same way you did as a child to survive. The
Mhm.
same thing you did as a child when you were in self survival mode, you'll do as an adult. And as a child, nobody could blame you for that. You were trying to survive. As
Yes,
an adult, you're going to hurt a lot of people in your life.
exactly. So that's kind of the mentality when you talk about a child experience trauma or hardship when they grow up, then they develop that kind of victim mentality, poor me,
That's right.
everyone around me.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Victim mentality. I tell my clients, you want to stay in a victim seat? It's comfortable, could be cozy, or you want to get up and get in a responsibility seat, which could be uncomfortable for you at times. Which seat you want to go into?
Mm,
One seat, you're going to sabotage your happiness. The other seat, you're going to help your happiness. But when you get into that responsibility seat, those schemas in your life might change.
mm,
People may not want you to change the role you were set up to play. You
right.
know, people like people pleasers. They say yes all the time. When you start saying no
Yeah.
and mean no, they may
Yeah.
not like that.
Right.
That's why the second piece, action, we process, not a me process. You need the support of other people to
Mm,
do for you what you can't do for yourself.
mm, mhm. That's what you mentioned about the group setting, that
Yep.
the person will be held accountable, meanwhile receive the support and resources they need from the group.
What we do in group is this: I teach all my group members uncomfortable conversations,
Mhm,
if done like an adult with empathy,
mhm,
validation, remembering to share your feelings,
mhm,
will enhance your relationships.
mhm,
But they're uncomfortable. People that come from tough childhoods don't like those feelings to come up.
mhm,
They'd rather run away, get angry, shut down, withdraw. But the problem is those conversations with children, with parents, with spouse, those uncomfortable conversations, if done like an adult, will improve your relationships and you're going to feel much better afterwards, feeling like you took care of yourself. That brings you from fragmentation to
mhm.
congruency.
Wow. So that's the step. If people want to be healed from their childhood trauma, want to become, happy. Let's say many people want to be happy those days, but no matter how they tried, whatever they run into, but they end up miserable or still feel lonely.
It's a
So,
self-fulfilling prophecy. In my book, I talk about the warden. It's this fictitious character that sits on your shoulder from childhood, telling you you don't deserve to be happy, telling you you'll never be successful, telling you you're unlovable. And you got to silence that warden's voice because it's powerful. And if you're only talking to yourself, you're talking to the wrong person. You got to have other people in your life, supportive people, to drown out the warden's voices.
yes. Those voices can become our subconscious, unconscious beliefs, thoughts, and really dictates rest of the life person.
Don't underestimate its power.
Mhm. Exactly. Yeah. So this personal emotional intimacy is so important because as we do marriage or couples therapy, we see people come to the therapy section, and sometimes one of the spouses complaining about there's no emotional connections there. There's no emotional intimacy there. So you will just address that issue because
Well, when couples come to me, I
Mhm,
tell them all the time, if you're coming into the session
mhm,
saying, what can I do to improve the relationship? Rather than what they're doing wrong, nobody wants to just hear what they're doing wrong.
right.
What happens is you become victims to each other
Yeah.
and you shut down your ability to hear the other one's concerns because you feel that they don't care about your concerns. So the first piece is to try and talk and say, look, if you're in this relationship, and you don't have to be, I don't determine that, you do.
Mhm,
You could be out of the relationship if you want. That's up to you. I don't make that call.
mhm.
But if you're in the relationship, that means you're saying to me, you're going to take actions to make the relationship better. You can't say in or out and not take the actions. If you're in, let's talk about the actions you could take without looking at your partner to make the relationship better. And I promise you, if you're willing to take direction, see, this is the key with all my clients.
Mhm,
There's two willingness in life, the
mhm,
willingness to get help. That's huge, but that's not enough. Then it's the willingness to take direction.
mhm.
If I can't take direction and do what I always did, I'm going to get what I always got.
Exactly.
So it's the willingness to take direction. And I tell my clients that from the beginning. You're paying me for nothing, and I can't help you unless you're willing to take direction. And what does that mean? It means at times doing things I don't feel like doing, things I don't want to do, things I may not trust. It's not easy, but that's how you heal and get better. No pain, no gain.
Yes. So that's why the therapist, a group for a groups, those roles, those settings come in because the person need a place to feel safe, to be able to process that. And we were talking about shifting the mindset from the victim mindset to now I need to take a responsibility for how I feel, for
That's
why
right.
I acted the way I act.
That's right.
Yeah.
You got to switch seats.
Yeah.
I tell my clients that have addictions, if you think your addiction is the problem, you're wrong.
Mhm.
That's the symptom. The problem is you're broken inside. And if you don't heal that, allow me to help you heal that, you're going to switch seats in a Titanic. You're just going to go from drinking to drugs or drugs to gambling or whatever.
Yeah.
Switch seats in a Titanic ain't going to help you, is it?
So, yeah, so you were talking about earlier, like even including depression, anxiety, and addictions, those are all coping mechanism. Um,
And they eliminate people. They're
mhm,
coping mechanisms that don't include relationships. They're coping mechanisms that keep you isolated within yourself,
right.
or you make the addiction your coping mechanism. It becomes your oxygen. I know it did for me.
Hmm.
I loved my family, but you know what? My addiction became my oxygen. And it's very hard to explain that to people that aren't addicts because they
Right.
say, but didn't they love me?
Hmm.
And the problem is when it comes to addiction, you're powerless, as it says in the first step. It's not a question of love. I would jump in front of a car for my family, but my addiction came first in my addiction. And it's
Mm.
hard for people to understand that aren't addicts because the addict feels that they're bad, they're horrible, they're a horrible human being. They don't say it,
Hmm.
but that's the fragmentation, the inside.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
what I tell addicts is you're a good person, but you have a bad disease. And
Mm.
if you don't manage that disease with awareness, action, and maintenance, or we process, you would have overcome it already if you could. Obviously, you're coming to see me because you couldn't do it yourself. Are you willing to take direction?
Mm. So here's my question. Between the addiction and the person unhealed wounds or trauma, which one you go first, or both?
It's both. There are people that have unhealed trauma that
Mhm.
act in with depression and anxiety, not with addiction. There are people with unhealed trauma that act out with addictions.
Mhm.
Some people do both. I always said, sometimes we get a little too wordy with pathology and stuff.
Mhm.
I believe every addict suffers from some anxiety, some depression, some borderline personality, some narcissism. It's all part of the chicken soup.
Mhm.
So sometimes we focus so much on these individual things when in reality, it's the brokenness inside. It comes down to I felt like I didn't matter. I couldn't trust people. I had to find something else to fill this void.
Mhm.
And I found gambling, drinking, drugs, pornography, on and on and on. That became my solution.
Mhm.
I went from trusting in people and relationships, in God and in people, and I lost both early on, to finding something else because I had to find something else to fill that void.
Yeah.
And I found the wrong coping mechanism.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh, wow. So it's good discussion. I really enjoy this conversation with you. So as you are talking about a children childhood trauma, uh, my next question is why do children who have trauma either act out with addictions or act in with depression, anxiety, which we already talked about this. And is there anything else you want to address in this question?
It's just that basically they just feel like they're unworthy, they don't deserve to be loved, and they just need to find something else to fill that void. And that's why they go to where they go to.
So with
Yeah.
that victim mentality, poor me, so they feel like depressed or anxious about what's gonna happen the next. The person that's become like a mental it's a mental condition.
Yeah.
So
Well,
Mhm.
all addicts were first fearaholics. They came from a childhood where they were very afraid that bad things would happen. So whenever they made up a story, if I talked to my wife, a job, whatever, their story always ended up bad, always had a bad ending to it.
Mhm.
So they felt in order to be safe,
Mhm.
I need to control every process I'm in. There's many addicts like myself that became very good business people
Mhm.
because they want to control things. And sometimes in business, that makes you money when you can control things and you don't rely on people.
Mhm.
But in relationships, not relying on people will bite you in the rear end.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, the relationship is very different. So also I was thinking about when the child felt the disease, the stress, the feel bad. So they would go looking for something bring them instant pleasure. So no matter it's sweets, no matter foods, drugs, whatever they can find, later on they can get into sex, all those kind of things, porn you mentioned about, bring them instant relief from that stress. Um,
Well, what I teach my group, that's a great point you made. Addicts and people that are traumatized, they don't know how to regulate their emotions. They don't know how to deal with conflict. When an addict acts out with their addiction, they're acting out way before they act out with their addiction. It's like a stick of dynamite. The dynamite goes off, but way before the dynamite goes off, something lit the fuse.
mhm.
Something started the ritual, the addictive ritual. So I teach my clients we need to learn how to regulate our feelings without running to the dynamite. We need to regulate our conflict without running to the dynamite. So the key is to put the fuse out as soon as you can, because once it's close to that dynamite, you're going to act out with addiction.
Yeah.
So we talk about what lights the fuse, and it's all different for different people, different
Mhm.
addicts, different trauma. What happens? My wife made me feel like I'm defective. My boss, my children, what lit the fuse? At that point, you turn around and you contact your witnesses, your groups. All my groups are on text messages together. So
Mhm.
you put the fuse out quickly
Mhm.
before the ritual starts
Right.
and the dynamite goes off.
Yeah, you gotta put the fire out before it burns the whole forest, and
And the quicker, the better.
the quicker the better. Yeah, and we don't have time to dive into that piece today, but how people stay sober, stay in that abstinence, and just step by step. Really, that's what you do in the group setting, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We learn how to regulate feelings
Mhm.
through our witnesses,
Mm.
therapist sponsor group, rather than allowing our thinking that we're ingrained to do take us to addiction or act in with depression and isolation and anxiety.
Mm, yeah, exactly. Well, there's so much the things you talk about, even AA 12 steps, I think is very I mean it's biblical like principles, those principles, we're powerless when we face sin, like that we talk about addiction, everything. So we have to, invite a higher power, in our case is God, into our lives to help us overcome those patterns.
So what you said is so important. I'm not saying to you that everybody is right for 12-step programs. It's not what I'm saying. I have guys in my group that didn't like the 12-step programs. Some love them. That's okay.
Mhm.
But you have to have a power greater in yourself, whatever that is. And to me, I had to have God's with skin first.
Mhm.
People like a sponsor, a therapist, a group that guided my decision making
Mhm.
because my best thinking was not working. So it's important, whatever you want to do, AA, therapy, whatever it is, you
Mhm.
got to have a good, healthy connections in your life, or else you're going to end up doing the same thing you always did. And just to be clear, it means you got to do things sometimes you don't feel like doing or don't want to do. Unfortunately, don't wait till you feel like doing it to
Mhm.
do it.
That's so important. The key you just mentioned about don't wait until you feel you can do it and do it, but do it anyway, right? Do it anyway.
100%.
Mm. There's so many nuggets in there, but I don't feel we have time to address every one of them. But what you said, you were saying is that get into a healthy, safe environment, no matter it's that looks like a 12 step or whatever group setting can be, or with a therapist, you gotta get into that healthy dynamic. Then help you set a shift your mindset, shift your behavior, shift your thought pattern, everything.
Healthy habits. It's like going to the gym.
Yeah.
If I go to the gym every morning, it's not hard to go to the gym. But if I try to go when I feel like it, when the weather's cold, I don't know, it's cold out there. If I don't get into healthy habits, it becomes much tougher. It's the same thing with anything in life. New Year's resolutions, healthy boundaries, recovering from addiction, healthy habits and structure is the key. But you got to have the patience till you get into those healthy habits. You're not going to do it right away.
No. And especially, people say, "Oh, I can do this by myself," but just if you just rely on your willpower, you will soon find out you're back in the same corner again, right?
Yep. My groups make themselves accountable, even if it's to go to the gym. They'll tell, I get 8 guys in each group. They'll say, I commit to going to the gym this morning, and I'll text you this afternoon that I went to the gym. I commit to cutting down on smoking, and I'll text you this. I'll commit to not eating, blah, 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 blah. I commit to not looking at porn. I commit to not having a drink. I commit. Accountability is huge when it comes to recovering from anything.
Mhm. Amen. Absolutely, accountability. So for those our audience out there, you have made your New Year resolution. Don't forget to find your accountability partner. No matter the therapist, a coach,
That's
and whoever
right.
can be your mentor, have accountability in your life.
We
So
process.
yeah, reprocess. So let's shift gear a little bit, Thomas. I want, talk about a spiritual aspect. So, you explain to us your spiritual journey with your own father and how you both found God later on in life.
Yeah. I had a terrible relationship with my father, terrible. He used to beat me. He when he came home drunk, he was going to hurt someone. And I was the oldest. I defended my kept my father off my mother's back, and I got beatings for that. But I was a tough kid. I fought him through that, but I hated him. So let me fast forward. My father had developed cancer. This is later on in life. I had kids, whatever. He developed cancer, and he was. My mother had called me and said to me, uh, "Tommy, your father's in the hospital. He's very ill, and I think you should see him before he passes on." I said, "Okay," and I went into the hospital to see him. And I remember walking in the hospital, and there was a priest there. And I said to the priest, "Do me a favor. Could you go speak to that gentleman in the bed B, whatever? It's my father. He's never gone to church. He has no religion, spirituality, and he's dying." She said, "Sure." So the priest went in and spoke to him. He came back out and he said, "Your father's in B?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "That guy's got more spirituality than anybody I know." I was like, "What?" He was in Alcoholics Anonymous for 15 years and he found himself and he became a wonderful grandfather to my children. Wonderful. My kids loved him. I went into the hospital to sit near him, trying to make a long story short. And I sat there and we were talking about sports, politics, basic stuff. I got up to leave and he grabbed my hand. Now he was all hooked up to morphine and everything. He grabbed my hand and he said to me, "Tommy," he says, "I was sitting where you were sitting 20 years ago and I was talking to my father and he was dying of cancer too. He says, I don't want to leave this earth with you feeling that you couldn't share with me. With you feeling like I did. I was never able to tell my father I loved him or that I cared for him. And I don't want this to happen to you." Now, remember what I said about addicts? I was early in recovery and I didn't know how to regulate these feelings. I had no clue. I wanted to run. And I grabbed him and he pulled me close to him in a weak way and he started to cry. I never saw my father cry. The only time my father cried is when he used to beat the tar out of me as a kid. And he used to come in the room afterwards and say, "I'm sorry, forgive me," whatever. But these were real tears. And I walked out of that room. I wanted to run to every addiction I had. Again, I didn't know how to regulate these feelings. And I said, "God," and I wasn't spiritual at the time, but I was desperate. I said, "God, please help me. Please. I don't want to go to my addictions. Please help me." Out of the elevator hospital came a guy that was in one of my 12-step programs. He just happened to be visiting somebody else. And I ran over to him and I hugged him. I know he must have said, "I didn't know Tom loved me so much," but I needed someone. And God sent me him. And a few days later, when my father died, I went to the wake. And there were guys from the 12-step rooms that were there at the wake. I didn't even tell anyone my father died. They were there for me. And one of the first times in my life, I felt like I mattered to people. They weren't there for any other reason but to be there for me. And after that, that's how I started my spiritual journey towards believing that somebody is up there. I always had a punishing God as a child. I always thought he was always going to get me. The priest molested me. I was on his bad list. And I had to change that perception, as I talk about in my book. And the truth is that wake was what got the ball rolling for me, because those people weren't there for any other reason but because I mattered to them. And that's part of what started me on my spiritual journey.
Wow, what a powerful story. Um, so God was with you the whole time. And
And I could give you another one, but I don't think we have time. But there was another time he showed up in my life too. I could tell you that now or another time.
yes, please.
Okay. So after I started to sponsor a lot of people in 12-step programs, my therapist and other people said, "Tommy, you have to do this for a living. You got to go back to school to get your master's degree." And I could tell you I hated school with a passion, but I listened to my higher powers. So the first day of school in a September day, remember, it's 30 years since I went back to school. I had my little pencil sharpener, my little pencil, my loose leaf paper. We're in a world of computers, and I'm bringing my little bottle of water and whatever. And I got on those French steps, and I was mad at God. And I says, "God, I hope you're getting a kick out of this. I hope you're enjoying this." And I went to Rutgers. I had a couple of sponsees that were in their social work. They were going to help me with the computer. I went to Rutgers University. I went in the wrong building, the wrong class. I couldn't find where I was going, and I was mad and mad at God.
Mhm.
I remember saying, God, why did you bring me here? Why did you tell me I had to go do this? I was so mad. And I walked in to the wrong building in the wrong class. And when I walked in, the professor was at the top of the doing the PowerPoints. The class was quieting down. We were about to begin. The professor turned to me and he said to me, Tom, and I said his name. He happened to be a guy that I was sponsoring, a guy that I helped get through with his marriage. So he turned to me and he saw me and he walked over to me and he gave me a big hug. Imagine the gossip in the cafeteria. So he comes to me, he gives me a big hug, and he said to me, you always told me, get your feet where they should be and your head will follow. You always told me that. He says, and I want to tell you, I don't know if you saved my life, but you certainly saved my marriage. And I see you're frazzled. I see you're upset. I'm telling you the same thing. Stick to it. I can help you. You have people in here that want to help you. And an amazing miracle is I graduated in 2 years with my master's degree. But God showed up for me that because I'm telling you now, if I didn't run into that guy, I had in my back pocket a letter, a resignation that my wife wrote that I said, thank you for allowing me in your school, but due for on the circumstances, I got to drop out. I was ready to go,
Mm.
but he had other plans.
Wow, praise God. That is miracle. It's
Yep.
so powerful. But thank you for sharing those powerful testimonials. So good, so good. Well, this is such a wonderful, enriching time. Just have this conversation dialogue with you. So good, and I'm mindful of our time. So I have a lot of questions for you, if you don't mind. Is that how have your relationships? Again, this is relationship real talk. But how have your personal relationships with your family changed today?
Okay. Quick story. This will be quicker.
Okay.
Um, I went to a PTA meeting with my youngest son one day, and we were sitting there, parents teaching to the teacher, and we were walking out, and the teacher said to me, Mr. Gagliano, could you have a minute? I want to speak to you. Now, for me, I was always in trouble as a kid, always in trouble. And I thought the teacher was going to tell me, your son, he's always in trouble, he's fighting, whatever, whatever. That's what I thought she was going to tell me. So she looked at me and she said to me, what's your secret? And I said to her, what do you mean? What is my secret? I didn't know where she was coming from.
Mhm.
She says, I never heard a son love his father so much like he loves you.
Wow.
I get a little emotional with this. Got to give me a minute.
Mhm.
She said, what's your secret? I never heard a kid talk with such respect. What's your secret? Now, I could have told her, well, it starts with addiction, and then you go to 12 plus programs and you go to a therapist, but I didn't think that's kind of what she was looking for. And I said, just be curious with your children. Always ask them questions. Make them feel like they matter. That's my secret. So that's my story to you on.
Mhm. Wow. So you've been through your own childhood and now you become a father. And how many children you have, by the way?
Four.
Four. Four. And you become a father that the teacher has to ask, how did you make your child
Yep.
feel
I
so?
never thought I'd be asking that question. Never. Not from my childhood. Never. I never thought that. And
So, mhm.
my mind was always in defense mode. Like, what did my kids do wrong? Because I was a screw up as a kid. So,
So that tells the world that through your personal endeavor, your personal transformative journey, and your relationship with your father, with God, your work with the therapy with other people, all those experiences, those journey have transformed you, changed you to become a good husband, a good father, a good worker, whoever the roles you put on yourself. And I mean, it's mind blowing to me how you are influencing other people's lives, and including the close ones in your own family. And that's amazing. That's powerful.
And
So,
it begins in the home. As I said earlier, that's where all our messages begin. And I had to challenge the messages that told me I was not a good person, not a good father. I didn't deserve to be happy. I didn't deserve the joy of life. I didn't deserve that warden that sat on my shoulders constantly was plummeting me. I never, ever could celebrate my victories. All I thought about was dilemmas. And
mm.
that's where it begins. It begins with challenging those childhood messages.
Well, thank you so very much for this episode. And our audience, if you are curious about Thomas, his book, I would highly recommend to look up his book called The Problem Was Me. The Problem Was Me. So let's start with ourselves. Then we can work on our relationship later on. But start with me, with ourselves, right?
Yeah. And if anybody wants to contact me, one of my websites is theproblemwasme.com. If you have any comments, if, like I said, I'm a speaker, or whatever, you can contact me on theproblemwasme.com, and you can listen to my podcast on Spotify and iTunes on The Problem Was Me in the search bar. So that's where you can check me out.
Thanks again, Thomas, for your time, for your experience and your story. And it's a big blessing to me. I mean, I enjoyed this interview with you very much. And
Thank you.
stay tuned. We will have a serious talk coming in the future.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored. Thank you.